I am really pleased to be able to just talk to you about the how. So we've talked a little bit about the details of the ASO discovery and development. Really, we have a very robust clinical development. We're thrilled to have Lori have joined our team. And I think it's really trying to think about how do we take this really beautiful mission that all of you are here for, that Stan has inspired us by this morning, thinking about the technology that's at the core of everything we do, with what Julie taught us, essentially. The process is very specific. We have very specific criteria that we follow. Every step is important. And ultimately rounding it all out with kind of the clinical development and really thinking about the regulatory process, the data, and just really wanting to think about the customization of every treatment protocol being so critical. And I think it's really, when I actually first met Stan, I met him with my parent hat on as a Nano-rare mom, and then immediately threw that hat out the window and said, how are you doing this? I've been in drug development for a really long time. How are you going to do this? This is so cool. How can we help? And I want to talk to you a little bit more. How are we putting these things together? And actually, without having it planned, Chris so nicely earlier today talked about traditional and drug discovery and development. We know this takes a really long time. It's very, very expensive. And ultimately, what the nano-rare patients need is what we're aiming for. It's a year and a half. It's $1.3 million. We know exactly what this takes. And ultimately, this standard R&D, it's just not suitable for these patients. And we know there's very specific reasons why. So ultimately, standard drug development, you're thinking about a patient population. How do you figure out what are the endpoints? You have to have statistical significance. You're really thinking about this much broader regulatory path and really thinking about kind of the drivers are different, right? They're very different than what we have. Whereas for n-Lorem, we're thinking of one patient. We're thinking of your child. We're thinking of your loved one. And we're trying to understand what is the most important thing. And actually in the regulatory documents, they have some flexibility on what the treatment goal can be. So of course, we want this to be a validated and standardized assessment when we can. And we also like to incorporate very specific patient goals. So what is the goal? What's the goal for you as a family, for your loved one to be able to reach when they're starting treatment? And it really enables us to individualize the programs and to focus on the quality and the efficiency and each patient one at a time. So essentially there's kind of two core elements. It seems pretty obvious, right? I mean, it's the people and the process. And I think this is what every organization tries to do, is really putting the two together in a very seamless fashion. But we mentioned this morning, I think what's been so interesting, and we continue to encounter this with a lot of our partners who, of course, working in traditional R&D, it's a mindset. So we're not working in a linear fashion. We can't wait to have all of the information. We have to use our best judgment to have as much information as we can at a particular period of time to be able to move a program forward, because that's what the patients need. And so really what we've been able to do is the mindset. Every single person, you've met a few of us here today, but the larger team is still doing a lot of work for all of our loved ones today. Every single person handpicked. We hear, we've talked a lot about the importance of the 30 years of antisense experience, and we've brought to that another however many decades of the drug development experience, and the two of them just have to come together really efficiently. So I think, ultimately the way of working is very biotech-esque, if you will. So we have to all have our core accountabilities, but ultimately, what are you doing each day? It might differ. And we're going to do each other's jobs when we have to. We're going to get this IND done by the last day of the month. And you know what? It's going in, regardless. And we're all going to make sure that happens. And those kind of goals. And it's really so fun. And it's really just really rewarding to be able to do that. And again, just every slide is the patient is able to be front of mind. And that's really a gift to be able to have that. And you've already seen this process and kind of where the portfolio is and where each program is. And in order to be able to do this is making sure that we have these quality systems and processes in place. And from a project management perspective, we have to be extremely succinct and concise. And I can tell you right now, if we want to know where every single program is, I know exactly where they are. It's very specific in our process. We know what's the next step. We know how long the next step will take. We know what the roadblocks are, the potential kind of barriers to moving more efficiently. And that is so important as well. And so our team has really stood up a very precise, and I think that's a really critical piece to be able to manage this volume of programs and to feel confident that as we add 10, 20, however many more, we're able to continue that consistency and ensure that knowledge and understanding. So really what this becomes is this like beautiful, seamless, transparent interaction. It's our processes, it's our team, it's all of you, it's our partners, it's moving from one step to the next, it's the application process, it's all of these things. It's kind of this nice sort of well-oiled machine. Not to say it's perfect, of course, right? We're not gonna make anything up, but we're really and truly in a place where we have this really nice interaction with all of these different elements. And that allows us to focus on the benefit risk decision, which I think Julie touched on it really nicely earlier. At each checkpoint is we need to think about the data, we need to think about the ASO progress and the data that's leading us towards an optimal ASO in the context of that patient. It's just this constant weighing of the benefit risk, and really then that transfers ultimately to the physician as well. So you already saw this I think it's just important to come back to what the process looks like and highlight the fact that, again, we don't have the luxury of doing anything in a linear fashion. And I think also thinking about how can we impart some of what we're learning back to traditional drug discovery and development. It's like, when do you have the ability to move things concurrently? When do you have the ability to say, you know what, we don't have all this information, but let's move at risk on this GLP tox study because we know we can't wait. And so ultimately, that really allows us to focus on every ASO program as a unique program. The ASO strategy is unique. So Julie showed a number of different strategies that we're looking at for each different patient. And then that allows us to kind of flex and move in one direction or another for each program. I think this is really important to highlight. And on the next 3 slides, I was just going to walk through a few specific examples of, I was trying to actually think of a program where it just went exactly as you might think. Like, let's just go straight from here to there. We have a patient, the physician applied, mutation is a drug target, and then we just went straight to IND, just straight, nothing on no kind of diversion. And honestly, I think every single program has required that flexibility. And so that's a really interesting element. And I think just a few examples. So if we're first starting in kind of the ASO discovery phase, really thinking about what are some things that we've encountered already, is we need the patient cells to be expressing the target sufficiently. We know that we also need to stay on top of the data. As new data comes out, the ASO strategy may need to change. So it might be that we're going in with a non-allele selective approach, and there's new data that suggests perhaps we need an allele selective strategy. And so that's something that ultimately then you have to pivot, and we're gonna start that ASO discovery with a different lens and a different focus then for allele selective. I think it's also really important to highlight that, when we accept a patient into the program, it's very much that. What that means is now you have you have all of our team, you have a drug discovery and development program. That doesn't mean you have a treatment, right? And we're gonna do everything we possibly can to be able to identify an optimal ASO for every patient, but we're not always gonna be successful, and we fully acknowledge that. And so what we have seen is that there may be a path where the path that we were on doesn't end up coming up with an optimal ASO with all the appropriate characteristics. So we might uncover a different alternative. Or we might say, you know what, we need to understand this functional consequence of this mutation a little bit more, and that necessitates additional research. So we've definitely had those things happen. I mean, I guess in my mind, I really visualize this as we have this laser focus. We got to go from target to IND as quickly and efficiently, high quality as possible. And we'll have research. We'll have this particular event happen, and then it'll come right back in, and we'll continue to move forward. In the GLP tox and sort of working with our intramural and extramural partners, we've had a couple of different, examples. So we've had one where we know that the GLP tox study is showing us findings that we're not comfortable. This is not an optimal ASO that would be safe for this patient, and that's important for us to impart, and ultimately then we need to either pursue a backup or we have to discontinue a program. I think interestingly, we also know that the IND, the FDA guidance document language, depending on the patient's severity, you're able to submit the document with different amounts of data. So we're very much on top of that, and that's a really critical piece. So some of the patients who are not progressing as rapidly, they're going to require a full tox package that will be 3 months plus 3 months of reporting. Whereas some of the more severe patients, they'll accept 2 weeks of in-life data and then submitting all the rest of the data when we have it. So I think a couple of other really interesting examples is, really having to ensure that we are getting as many ASOs to the CROs. So we need to work with our extramural partners. The scheduling slots, I didn't know anything about this, and I have so much respect for Julie and the team, and just it's juggling of trying to make sure we get the slots and then have something ready to go in that slot at that particular time. And then the last one here is really just thinking about sterile fill. So Julie mentioned this with regards to 2 potential paths there. So there's the hospital, local hospital compounding, and then the sterile fill and finish. And ultimately, they're both viable paths, and the timelines are different. And so really trying to think about that in the context of each patient. And then the last few examples, really, and we have one more panel, so sorry, you guys have to deal with me one more time, but we have a really exceptional panel of physicians we'll talk about with this afternoon. And we are, now that we have more and more ASOs coming towards the patient treatment, it's becoming more apparent that the institutions, we need to support them better. We really need to think about some of these policy changes. How are we working to be able to move this more efficiently, and be able to make sure that if physicians move or if an ASO is ready to go, ultimately we need to be able to get this ASO that's ready to go. And that's the most difficult part, is when we have an ASO ready to treat a patient and the inability to do so, sometimes because of institutional barriers. So, I think in conclusion on this section, and then continue to move on to more collaborations, is just really the importance of the antisense and the drug discovery and development, the development experience. We're really focused on the systems, on quality, and on the flexibility, and really are successfully industrializing this process. And I think the really cool thing here is, even though our portfolio is very robust at this point in time, it's going to continue to grow. And because we feel confident that we have these data platforms set up, we'll have the ability to ensure that the knowledge is gained in a very efficient and effective way and shared in a way that can be meaningful to the community as well. So these last couple of minutes, just wanted to talk, we had our partner, the partner panel this morning, and then also talking more about expanding to be able to identify and help more people with optimal ASOs. And so really what we're thinking about is, how can we try to export this model? And I think we heard from our Ionis partners and others is, how can we make sure all of this is published? But the challenge is, how do you actually put all of these pieces together to be able to ensure that individuals that could benefit from this technology and all the knowledge that's been gained can do so in a very effective way? And so the goal here really is to think about customizing a model, evaluating where each partner is, what are the missions, how do they align, meeting them where they are. You heard, I think, 4 of our different collaborations that we spoke to. They're completely different, one from the other, and working with these different individuals and institutions and organizations in different ways. And again, focusing on the integration. So that's really the key piece, is moving from one step to the next. What are the decisions that are being made? Why did these ASOs move forward and these did not? And ultimately, all of these benefit-risk decisions that are made constantly as we're working to identify that optimal ASO. And of course, as I will always say, is we would love to chat with any of you guys about interesting collaborations. So Lori mentioned kind of some of the partners in excellence. So we do have 9 that we've sort of, from an agreement perspective, continuing to grow. We already touched a little bit on the St. Jude collaboration that Kristen shared, and we have her colleague Frank here as well. We also have, of course, the N-of-1 collaborative, so thank you. I think I saw Winston and Tim being here. So this is a professional society really focused on bringing together the community of experts in individualized treatments. And also a number of global collaborations. So Sick Kids Toronto, they weren't able to be here today, but that's a future collaboration that we are spending a lot of time really working to foster. Obviously Genomics England, and there's many more other organizations. We also have Anna Mika, I think, here from the 1M in Europe, and really trying to think, again, if we have ASOs that are already treating patients in the US, We already have an approved research IND. We identify someone in a different country. Like, what are we doing about that? We need to do something because that's important and it should be a relatively straightforward path. So the goal here is, again, we acknowledge we are a small organization. We're doing everything we possibly can with the capabilities that we have, with the funding that we have, and we need to continue to grow and to partner and grow and partner and grow. And of course, there will be many other ways that we can scale as well, but these partnerships are so critical. I think we already talked a little bit about data collection, and I'm out of time, so I won't touch on this too much, but I think this is a really important element of what all of us are doing, and we have defined data collection and data sharing in these multiple different ways and continue to, especially this meeting today, hopefully we've at least taught something to each of you and would be very happy to hear more feedback on what else you'd like to learn from what we're doing as well. So I started this off by saying, how are we doing this? This is how. I think we've shared, and hopefully you can at least get a sense of we do know how to do this. And really the integration of the team, this fantastic group of experts that we've really pulled together, and having these ability to customize in real time for every single program. And that'll be an important focus that we'll maintain even as we grow and have more programs, that we still will focus every single patient's program. It's not that much different than a commercial drug program. It's going to have that much attention and rigor that's going to go into every single decision. And then ultimately collaborating is really going to help us to be able to help more patients together. So the last two here, I just wanted to make sure that everyone that wasn't here with us today is acknowledged. We just have this really fantastic team, and our lab is growing as well. And with that, I think we'll just say thank you, and I think the other two will come up for questions.